Hello and welcome to this Astranti video. Today we'll be talking about activity-based costing, a topic which appears in BA2 and in P1. Costing can be quite a tricky topic to get your head around. There are various types, and remembering all the different stages can be a bit confusing. However, in this video we'll explain when activity-based costing should be used, and we'll walk you through an example step by step to help you understand this method. This is an extract from our video on Chapter 5 of the BA2 course, and if you want to see the full video, this can be found on the Astranti website, where all of our CIMA certificate resources can be accessed for free. But for now, let's jump straight in and look at activity-based costing.
So to start with, I want you to think back to a simpler time when the essential things that a business required to produce a product were its workforce and the materials that the products were made from. Consider workers in a factory manufacturing wooden chairs, for example. These products are generic, they're highly standardised and produced in long production lines, predominantly by hand. Now the wages of the carpenters that are making the chairs, the cost of the wood and the cost of the varnish, for example, are those costs that are most significant in manufacturing these products. And overheads like machine maintenance, electricity, research and development, for example, are far less significant. So the long automated production lines here look very different to the process that's carried out in the modern manufacturing environment, where manufacturing processes are far more complex and technical, with a higher degree of mechanical and computerized input. So what this means is that labour and materials are no longer the only key resources that a company needs to consider. Overheads in modern manufacturing environment make up more of the total cost the company incurs when producing each product. Products are often made in specific stages, often with significant amount of overheads that are unrelated to volume. Take, for example, Apple and the various phones, watches and tablets that the company produces. A huge amount of the overhead costs the company incurs will be related to the design, development, customization of these products, all of which would still be incurred regardless of whether one single watch or phone is being produced or hundreds or thousands are being produced. Traditional costing systems, so absorption and marginal costing, can both be too simplistic in their approach to modern production costing. So getting the costing right is absolutely essential, which is where activity-based costing comes in. So let's consider an example to see how activity-based costing works. Let's imagine that we run a local pie shop and we make the best apple pie in the country. It's renowned in this town and the next, and every single day without fail, the pie shop's inundated with orders. But the success is proving too much to handle. The decision's been made to open a brand new pie factory with top-of-the-range pie filling machines, ovens, and packaging areas, among other great additions which are sure to make the operation a whole lot more successful. And we're switched on business owners. We realise we can put this increased capacity to good use. Not only can we continue to make the fresh pies that we'll sell daily to restaurants and cafes, but we can also begin to produce a frozen pie that we'll sell through supermarkets. And we want to know just how much each of these pies will cost us to produce, given our new facilities. So in the new factory we can produce 5,000 of each pie in the period, and the rate at which pies can be produced is 50 pies an hour. The total overheads amount to £50,000, so that includes the cost of rent, electricity, heating, water, maintenance, for example. And in a single period, a total of 200 labour hours are worked. And we decide to absorb our overheads into the cost of our pies based on labour hours. And absorption costing is covered in other areas of the syllabus, but essentially what we're looking to do here is to calculate the full production cost of a single pie. So what we therefore need to know is how much of the total overhead cost the business incurs we need to allocate to each unit, so each pie produced. So we start with finding the overhead cost per labour hour, by dividing the total overheads by the number of labour hours. So if we look at our figures, that's a total of £50,000 divided by the 200 labour hours that are worked. So popping those values into the equation, we find the overhead cost per hour is equal to £250. And now we've got this figure, we can find the cost per pie by dividing the cost per hour by the number of pies that are produced per hour. So that's the £250 we just calculated divided by the number of pies per hour, which is 50 pies. So 250 divided by 50, that's a cost of £5 per pie. So that's the way in which overheads will be allocated under the traditional absorption costing system. And given that each pie takes the same amount of time to bake, whether we sell it fresh or sell it frozen, it seems reasonable that each type of pie is allocated the same amount of fixed overhead. But one day, the new production manager is leading a production strategy meeting and highlights that there's a significant difference in the number of production runs that are required to produce 5,000 of each pie. The 5,000 frozen pies can be produced in 10 production runs during the first few days of the period, and they're then shipped and frozen. But the fresh pies need to be baked to order. After all, no one wants a 30-day-old pie. So to avoid spoilage, 90 fresh pie production runs are required in a single period. And our production manager also highlights that the overhead costs the company incurs mostly relate to setting up the ovens and the machinery. And in fact, this setup is required for every single production run. So when we allocated our overheads on the basis of labour hours, we did so on the basis that each pie requires the same amount of baking time and therefore the same amount of effort or work is required for each. But this new information highlights there's in fact a big difference between the number of production runs required for each, and therefore the total setup time and the cost for each. So in light of all of this then, our production manager claims it would in fact be more appropriate to allocate overheads based on production runs rather than labour hours. So how would we do that? Well, we start with the number of production runs for each, so that's just the 10 for frozen pies and 90 for fresh pies. So that means in total 100 production runs are required. And now we can use this to calculate the overhead cost per run by dividing the total overheads, so that's the £50,000 in total overhead costs, by the number of production runs, which we know is 100 production runs. So 50,000 divided by 100, that is a cost of £500 per production run. But we want to find out how much to allocate to each type of pie, so we therefore need to find the total overhead for each. And we do this very simply by multiplying the £500 overhead cost per run by the number of runs. So for frozen, it's 500 multiplied by 10, and for fresh, it's 500 multiplied by 90. So that gives us a total overhead cost for frozen pies of 5,000 and for fresh pies of 45,000. And now to find the cost per pie, all we need to do is divide the total overhead figures for each type by the number of pies produced of each type. And we know 5,000 of each type of pie is produced in the period. So for frozen pies, we take the 5,000, divide by 5,000. And for fresh pies, it's the 45,000, also divided by 5,000. So we therefore find the cost per frozen pie is £1, but the cost per fresh pie is £9.
So we've come to the end of this video, and you should now have a better grasp of activity-based costing. Want to learn more about costing systems? Well, make sure you check out the full video, which can be found for free on the Astranti website as part of our full range of CIMA certificate resources. If you've enjoyed this video, why not subscribe to one of our social media accounts? We can be found on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and of course, here on YouTube, where you can find many more videos on a wide range of topics. Thanks for watching.